He's not breathing. God, the baby's not breathing. The words tore out of Sofia Hartley before she could stop them, and the sterile hospital room at 2:48 in the morning fell into a terrible, perfect silence. The incubator glowed like a small glass coffin. Inside lay a newborn with skin the color of slate, his tiny chest still, the monitors screaming their flatline warnings into the antiseptic air that smelled of blood and disinfectant and something worse, the metallic scent of death waiting at the edges. Sofia stood in her wrinkled nanny uniform, the white creased and stained from a double shift at the Mercer household, her hands trembling as she stared at the dying infant. 3 feet away, Luca Valenti stood frozen. 6'2", shoulders broad enough to carry an empire, his tailored black suit somehow immaculate despite the chaos, his face carved from stone except for his eyes. Those eyes burned with something that looked like rage until you understood it was terror. The man who controlled Boston's underworld, who made other men weep with a single glance, was completely powerless. 2 doctors moved in practiced urgency, one checking vitals, the other inserting a line. Their voices clipped and clinical. Numbers. Measurements. Time. Sofia didn't think. She simply moved forward like something had seized control of her body, and she was just watching it happen. She rolled up her left sleeve, revealing the scars she had kept hidden for 8 years beneath long fabric and downturned eyes. Scars running in every direction like a map of hell. Like a blade had worked its way across her skin again and again. A nurse looked up, confused. I'm O negative. Universal donor. Take mine. Take whatever he needs. Her voice sounded like it belonged to someone else, someone brave. Someone who mattered. The nurse hesitated for only a second, then nodded. This was a private wing of Massachusetts General, the kind of place money built when money needed to disappear from official records. When Luca Valenti needed a child born and kept silent. The staff knew not to ask questions. They simply obeyed. A line went into Sofia's arm. Warm. Then cold. Then the sensation of something precious leaving her body, flowing through clear tubing toward an incubator where a baby she had never met was turning a slightly less terrible shade of blue. Rocco, Luca's lieutenant, whispered something. He was tall and scarred, the kind of man who had seen things that most people only had nightmares about. In 15 years of working for Luca Valenti, he had witnessed power, violence, mercy, and ruthlessness. But he had never seen this. Boss. Who is this woman? Not a question. A statement of shock. Luca didn't answer. He couldn't. He stood with his hands at his sides, watching Sofia's blood flow into the tubes, and something in his chest shattered like a candle flame in a winter wind. He only knew this woman's name because she had spoken it 18 hours ago at the warehouse by the harbor. Sofia Hartley. She had appeared like a ghost at his door with his daughter Emma, the child stolen from him a year ago, the daughter he thought he would never hold again. She had spoken the truth about where Emma came from, what horrors she had endured, and why she had risked everything to bring her back. He had expected nothing else from her. Not bravery like this. Not sacrifice. Heart rate climbing. 52. 60. 70. The monitors began to sing a different song. A song with rhythm. A song that meant the baby was coming back. The infant's lungs expanded. A cry, thin and fierce and the most beautiful sound Sofia had ever heard in her life, pierced the hospital room. The baby's skin began to shift toward pink. Toward life. Rocco closed his eyes and made the sign of the cross. Sofia's vision blurred, and she understood that she was crying, though she couldn't remember when the tears had started. The needle in her arm felt like nothing. Her body felt like nothing. Only the knowledge that someone was alive because of what she had done, because of something she had chosen to give, filled her completely. A doctor looked at Luca. There was respect in that look, and something else, confusion, maybe, at the sight of this most dangerous man standing utterly defeated beside a young woman who had just saved his son's life with her own blood. The baby will be fine. The transfusion was exactly what he needed. Another hour and we would have lost him. Another hour. The doctor didn't say what both of them understood. That another hour and there would be nothing left to save. Luca turned to Sofia then, and for just a moment, the terrible composure that had protected him for 37 years cracked. His hands reached out. Not to touch her. Just to acknowledge that she was there, that she was real, that she had done the impossible. What's your name? Luca. No. Your name. Tell me your name again. Sofia. Sofia Hartley. He repeated it once, quietly, like a prayer he hadn't spoken in decades. Sofia. Then he turned away before she could see what his face looked like. Rocco moved closer to her, his rough voice soft. We can take care of you. Whatever you need, you tell us. She shook her head. She was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with her body and everything to do with her soul. She had given something irreplaceable to a stranger's child. To the son of the most dangerous man in Boston. She had no idea what that choice would cost her, or what it would save. But what she did not know was that in 72 hours, she would learn the truth about why Emma had been taken, who had taken her, and what darkness had been protecting that darkness for years. She did not know that Luca Valenti had been searching for his daughter since the night she vanished, that he had killed men and destroyed families searching for her. She did not know that Douglas Hale, the predator who had left her own scars, was connected to the theft of Emma through a chain of cruelty that extended all the way to the woman who employed her, the woman named Catherine Mercer. And she did not know that by giving her blood to save a stranger's child, she had bound herself to a man who would move the entire machinery of his empire to protect her. But that choice was still ahead of her. First, she had to survive the next 3 days. The hospital doors opened somewhere down the hallway. Footsteps echoed. The sound of the city at night, restless and cold and indifferent to the drama of small human lives. Sofia closed her eyes and held on to the feeling of that baby's first breath, knowing it might be the last good thing she experienced for a very long time. Now let us go back. Back to 72 hours earlier, to a night that started with $78 in crumpled bills and a choice that would change everything. Back to Murphy's Diner at 3:22 in the morning, where Sofia Hartley stood alone behind an empty counter, counting the last dollars to her name. 72 hours earlier, the city slept restless under an October sky that promised nothing but cold. Sofia Hartley woke before the alarm, as she always did, in the converted storage closet that the Mercer family called her room. 5:30 in the morning. The cot beneath her held the shape of her body like a fossil pressed into stone. Her breath came out white in the darkness because Catherine Mercer kept the house cold at night to save money, even though the heating bill was paid by the very paycheck Sofia had not received in full for 3 weeks running. She sat up slowly, her spine making small sounds like old wood settling. The closet measured 6 feet by 4 feet. A single shelf held her 4 work uniforms, all black, all pressed with creases sharp enough to cut. A small mirror hung on the door, cracked in one corner. Below it sat the only thing she truly owned, her grandmother's recipe book, its pages yellowed and fragile, filled with handwriting that curved like vines. In the margins her grandmother had written notes in Italian, small prayers beside the ingredient lists. Sofia's fingers found the book before her feet found the cold floor. She pulled her nightgown over her head and looked at her reflection in that cracked mirror. 28 years old. The face looking back belonged to someone who had been older for a very long time. Her dark hair hung limp and tangled. Her eyes were the color of coffee that had been left sitting for hours, drained of warmth. But it was not her face she was examining. It was her back, glimpsed over her shoulder in the small glass, where scars ran in every direction like a map of a country she did not want to inhabit. Cigarette burns the size of coins. Long knife marks that had faded from angry red to pale tissue that caught the light wrong. 8 years of marks from Douglas Hale, the man who had decided her body was his to decorate with pain. 8 years of wearing long sleeves even in summer, of showering in the dark, of never letting anyone see her because she had learned that what people could not see, they could not judge. She turned away from the mirror and dressed carefully, pulling the black uniform up her body like armor. The Mercer household was silent as she moved through the hallways. Beacon Hill Mansion. for stories of inherited wealth and deliberate cruelty. Catherine Mercer had bought this house the same year she hired Sofia as a live-in nanny, which meant the house belonged to Catherine and Sofia belonged to the house. The kitchen smelled like nothing because no one in this family had cooked a meal in years. Sofia began the work she had performed every morning for 8 years, heating milk, measuring oatmeal, cutting fruit into shapes that would make the twins smile. The Mercer twins, Thomas and Elizabeth, were 6 and 8 years old and had never once thanked her for anything. Not because they were cruel, but because their mother had raised them to believe that people like Sofia existed for the purpose of existing for them. Sofia did not mind. She had learned that love did not require gratitude. She had learned that the best love was invisible, the kind you poured into children who would never know your name after they left your life. At 7:45, Catherine descended the stairs in a silk robe the color of champagne. The robe probably cost more than Sofia made in a month, though no one had paid her a full month's wage since June. Catherine's face was already arranged in its expression of perpetual disappointment, as if the entire world had committed a personal offense by continuing to exist. Sofia, the children's breakfast should have been ready 10 minutes ago. Catherine's voice dripped like something toxic. Do I need to dock your pay again? Sofia did not look up from the orange she was cutting. Her hands remained steady even though steadiness was a choice she had to make every single morning. No, I'm sorry, It's ready now. You apologize far too easily. It makes you seem weak. Catherine poured coffee into a mug that probably cost $70. Also, I noticed you used 2 paper towels yesterday instead of 1. The waste in this house is becoming unconscionable. Sofia nodded. She had learned that nodding was safer than speaking. The children came down and sat at the table she had prepared, and they ate while Catherine read something on her phone and made small disappointed sounds at regular intervals. At 8:15, Sofia drove them to school in the Mercer family's second car, a vehicle she was permitted to operate but never to use for her own purposes. She drove in silence while Thomas and Elizabeth debated the merits of various video games. The school day gave her 5 hours. 5 hours when she was not watching children or managing a household or holding herself in the rigid posture of someone who was always being observed. She drove to the public library and sat in a corner with her laptop, searching for jobs that did not exist and reviewing savings accounts that did not have enough in them. The number haunted her, $22,000, needed in 7 days. Not for herself. She had stopped needing anything for herself years ago. At 3 o'clock, she retrieved the twins. At 6 o'clock, she prepared dinner. At 7 o'clock, Catherine Mercer came into the kitchen wearing a dress made of dark fabric that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. I'm having dinner guests tomorrow evening, Catherine said, not as a statement but as a sentence designed to create maximum chaos. 8 guests. 8:30. You'll serve. You'll smile this time. Your expression last month was absolutely due. It reflected poorly on the household. Yes. And Sofia? Do something about your hands. They're calloused and dreadful. Wear gloves. The last thing my guests need is to be reminded that people like you have such rough hands. Catherine left without waiting for a response, her footsteps echoing down the hallway like a closing door. At 9:45 that night, after the twins were asleep and the house had settled into the particular silence that only comes in places where no one truly lives together, Sofia retreated to her closet. She locked the door, a lock she had installed herself with a hardware store key, and pulled a small wooden box from beneath her cot. The box was lined with old newspaper. Inside lay $78 in crumpled bills. 1s and 5s mostly, a few 10s. Everything she owned. That morning, Catherine Mercer had taken $200 from her paycheck, claiming Sofia had broken a vase. Sofia had not broken a vase. She knew she had not broken a vase because she had been upstairs reading bedtime stories to the twins. But Catherine's word was the only word that mattered in this house. The missing money was the color of desperation now. 7 days. $314. $37 per day. She was working 14-hour days for a wage that came in late and left early, and the arithmetic of her life simply refused to balance. She held the money in her palm and thought about what it represented. Not freedom. She had stopped believing in freedom when she was 19 years old and Douglas Hale had decided she belonged to him. The money represented something else. Something smaller and more fragile. It represented a choice she had made one night that could not be unmade. At 11:30, wrapped in a thin coat that had been thin for 3 winters now, Sofia walked through streets gone empty and cold. October wind moved through Boston like a blade wrapped in ice, and her breath became visible and disappeared and became visible again with each step forward. Dead leaves skittered across the sidewalk, pushed by something she could not see. The city at night was a different place than the city during the day. It belonged to people with nowhere to go. The women's shelter occupied the basement of an old church on a street that the city had decided was not quite worth saving. Sofia volunteered here 3 nights a week, and on those 3 nights she felt like she was doing something that mattered. The shelter director, a woman named Patricia whose grey hair seemed to be held back by sheer force of will, looked up as Sofia entered through the back door. "You're earlier than usual," Patricia said. "I needed to come." Sofia pulled off her coat. "Is she here?" Patricia's expression changed, became careful. "Room 3. She's been asking for you." Sofia moved down the hallway where the walls were painted yellow to try to make people feel less afraid. She knocked softly on door 3 and entered without waiting for an answer. The girl sitting on the small bed was 7 years old, with dark hair and bruises on her wrists that formed a pattern. The pattern was the shape of hands. Small hands had bruised her, or large hands that had learned to hold back some of their strength. The girl's name was Emma. She had been at the shelter for 5 days. She had not spoken to anyone except Sofia. "Hi, Emma," Sofia said, sitting on the bed beside her. "Did you eat dinner?" Emma shook her head, her eyes fixed on something in the distance. Sofia waited. She had learned that waiting was sometimes the only thing a person could do. The radiator beneath the window hissed and clicked like something alive. After a long time, Emma turned and looked at her. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper, like wind through a building nobody lived in anymore. "My daddy is looking for me," Emma said. "Patricia told me." She said my daddy never stopped looking. Sofia's hand froze in the moment of reaching toward the girl's hair. Everything inside her went very still. "What did Patricia tell you?" "She said a man came. A man asking questions about me." "A man whose name is?" Emma paused, searching her memory. "Valenti. She said his name is Luca Valenti. Patricia said he's very bad, very dangerous, and he has a lot of people who work for him. She said he kills people." The closet in the Mercer house seemed very far away now. The $78 seemed like nothing at all. "Did Patricia say anything else?" Sofia's voice came out steady, which was a miracle. "She said he's my daddy. But daddy is supposed to be bad, and she said he's very bad. So I don't know if that's good or if that's bad." Emma looked at her with an expression that should never appear on a 7-year-old's face, an expression that contained all the confusion of a child who had learned that the world did not have simple answers. "Do you think a bad daddy is better than no daddy?" Sofia pulled the child against her chest and held her, feeling Emma's small heart beating against her own, and in that moment she understood that her life had been waiting for something. All the years of marks on her back, all the years of counting small dollars and wearing long sleeves, all the years of being invisible, they had been leading to this moment, to a child who needed her to be brave. Outside, Boston slept in its cold October darkness, not knowing that by morning, everything would begin to change. Emma's eyes fluttered open in the darkness of the women's shelter. The fluorescent lights above buzzed like trapped insects, casting everything in a sickly white glow. Sofia sat beside her on the worn couch, her nanny uniform still creased from the Mercer house, her hand gentle on the child's shoulder. The shelter smelled like industrial soap and instant coffee, the smell of places where people came when nowhere else would take them. For 3 weeks, Emma had barely spoken. Social services had brought her here with bruises on her wrists that looked like adult finger marks, her eyes hollow in a way that should never exist in a 7-year-old's face. But tonight, something had shifted. Tonight, she finally whispered words that would change everything. "My real name isn't Emma Johnson," the child said, her voice barely audible. "It's Emma Valenti." Sofia's hand froze. The room seemed to tilt slightly, as if the foundation beneath them had cracked. She kept her voice gentle, steady. "What did you say, sweetheart?" "A bad man took me from my daddy a year ago. The lady who had me said my daddy didn't want me anymore. But she lied." Emma's small fingers twisted the fabric of her borrowed pajamas. "She hurt me when I asked about him. She said if I kept asking, my daddy would know I was being a problem, and he'd give me away to someone worse." Sofia's mind raced through 1,000 calculations, none of them good. She reached down slowly, as if approaching a frightened animal. "Who is your daddy, Emma?" The child pulled something from beneath her pillow, a photograph, torn at the edges, worn from being held too many times. In it, a tall man with severe features and dark eyes held a laughing baby girl. He was looking at her like she contained the entire world. Sofia recognized his face from news reports she'd seen on the shelter's television, from conversations she'd overheard between the director and police. Luca Valenti. The man who ran Boston's underworld. The man whose name people whispered with fear. "They said he's a bad man," Emma continued. "But he used to read me stories every night. He wouldn't let anyone hurt me. And then one day I woke up in a different place and the lady said my daddy was too busy to want me anymore. She said he had a new baby coming and he didn't need me taking up his time." Sofia's hand moved to the small of her back without conscious thought, feeling the scars beneath her uniform. 8 years of Douglas Hale. 8 years of learning that the world had teeth, and most people would do nothing to stop you from being devoured by them. She understood what it meant to be a child no one protected. "Did the lady ever tell you anything else?" Sofia asked, her voice careful. "Anything about where your daddy is? How to reach him?" Emma shook her head. "Patricia just said he's very bad and very dangerous and he has a lot of people who work for him. She said he kills people." The child looked up with an expression that should never appear on a young face, an expression that contained all the confusion of a child who had learned that the world did not have simple answers. "Do you think a bad daddy is better than no daddy at all?" Sofia pulled the child against her chest and held her, feeling Emma's small heart beating against her own. Outside, Boston slept in its cold October darkness, not knowing that by morning, everything would begin to change. An hour later, Sofia sat alone in the shelter's small office at 2:08 a.m., the computer's blue glow illuminating her face. The director would be furious if she found out, but Sofia had to understand who she was about to approach. She typed the name into the search engine. Articles filled the screen. Luca Valenti, age 39, suspected of controlling organized crime in Boston. Luca Valenti, wanted for questioning in 7 different cases. Luca Valenti, rumored to have taken over his father's empire at age 24 and systematically destroyed anyone who challenged him. And then she found something else. A society page from 2 months ago. A photograph of Luca in a tuxedo, his hand on the arm of a woman named Isabella, both of them smiling at some charity event. The caption read, "Local businessman Luca Valenti and his wife Isabella enjoy an evening supporting children's hospital services." Sofia dug deeper. Found the obituary dated 6 weeks ago. Isabella Valenti, age 32, complications from childbirth. Survived by her husband and 1 son, Leonardo, currently in neonatal intensive care at St. Mary's Hospital. So he was a widower. A man who had just lost his wife while searching for his stolen daughter. A man carrying grief that would crush most people into powder. Sofia opened her email and began typing. She wrote it 3 times before she got it right. Kept the word simple, honest. "I have your daughter Emma. She is safe. I will bring her to you. This is not a trap. Sofia Hartley." She added the address of Murphy's Diner, the one place open at 3:36 a.m. where she could control the environment, at least slightly. She looked at the diner's phone number in the online directory and called it, waited for Tom the night manager to answer. "Tom, it's Sofia." "Yeah, I know it's 3 in the morning." Her voice was steady despite her heart trying to escape her chest. "I need a favor. I'm going to email you a message. I need you to hand-deliver it to a man named Luca Valenti if he ever comes looking for someone named Emma. Will you do that for me?" Tom didn't ask questions. 15 years working night shifts at Murphy's Diner meant he understood that some requests existed outside normal logic. "You in trouble, Sofia?" "No. I'm trying to prevent someone else from being in trouble. That's all." She sent the email. Watched it disappear into the digital void. Then she went back to the sleeping area, lay down next to Emma, and waited for dawn to break over a city that had no idea what was coming. At 3:22 a.m. the following night, the door to Murphy's Diner chimed. Sofia sat in a corner booth with Emma curled against her shoulder, the child's breathing deep and even with the sleep of the young. The checkered floor gleamed under fluorescent lights that had been flickering since before Sofia was born. The smell of stale coffee and grease hung thick in the air. The waitress took one look at who had just entered and disappeared into the back without being told. 3 men moved through the diner like shadows finding form. The one in the center was Luca Valenti. He wore a charcoal coat that probably cost more than everything Sofia owned multiplied by 3. His dark eyes scanned the space systematically, assessing for threats, and when they landed on the booth, his entire body went rigid. He approached slowly, his movements controlled, each step deliberate. 2 men flanked him, one with a scar running from his temple to his jaw, the other with hands that looked like they had broken more things than most people could count. She recognized them from descriptions Emma had given her. Rocco and Sal. The men who had been searching for Emma with the same intensity their boss had. Luca stopped 6 feet away. When he spoke, his voice was quiet and absolutely deadly. "You sent a message saying you have my daughter. I've killed men for less audacious lies." Sofia didn't look away. She didn't move. She simply tilted Emma's sleeping face toward the light so he could see her clearly. "I'm not lying." Luca's expression cracked like ice under pressure. He took 2 steps forward and dropped to one knee beside the booth. His hand trembled as it reached toward Emma's hair, barely touching, as if she might shatter beneath his fingers. Emma's eyes fluttered open. For a moment, confusion clouded her face. Then recognition. Then something broke open inside her. "Daddy," she whispered. Luca's voice broke completely. "Baby girl." "Oh God, baby girl." He lifted her into his arms, his face buried in her hair, his shoulders shaking with the force of a man crying for the first time in years. Emma clung to him, her small arms wrapping around his neck with desperate strength. "The bad man said you didn't want me anymore," Emma said into his shoulder. Luca pulled back, cupped her face in his hands. His eyes were red but clear. "I have looked for you every single day for 374 days. Every single day." He looked at Sofia over Emma's head. "Who are you?" "Nobody," Sofia said. "I'm a nanny. I volunteer at a shelter. Emma was brought there 3 weeks ago. Tonight she told me who she really was." Luca studied her, the worn uniform, the way she held herself like someone trained to disappear, the exhaustion that lived in her bones. "What do you want? Money? Protection? Name it. I want you to keep her safe. That's all. Nobody does something like this for nothing." "Who sent you?" Sofia met his gaze directly. "Nobody sent me. I know what it's like to be a child no one protects. I couldn't let her stay lost." Something shifted in Luca's expression. His eyes dropped to her wrist where her sleeve had ridden up, revealing the edge of a scar, a thin white line that ran from her wrist toward her elbow. He looked back at her face. He didn't ask about it. Not yet. But he saw it. He saw her. "You're coming with us," he said. Not a question. The black SUVs were waiting outside, engines running, their windows dark as night. Sofia held Emma's hand as they crossed the parking lot. Behind them, the diner's neon sign buzzed and flickered like something dying. The October wind cut through her thin uniform, and for the first time in 2 years, Sofia didn't feel like she was drowning. What she didn't know was that her decision to help Emma had already set in motion events that would systematically destroy 2 people who had believed themselves untouchable. That within 12 hours, a doctor would call with news that would test every part of Luca Valenti's power. That she would offer the only thing left that she possessed, blood from her own veins, to save a child who wasn't hers. And that nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same. The hospital room was so quiet you could hear the machines breathing for the baby. Sofia sat in the vinyl chair beside the incubator, her left arm extended on a small table, a cotton ball taped to the inside of her elbow where they had drawn the blood. 2 pints. They had taken 2 pints from her veins, and those pints were now flowing through the tubes connected to a newborn boy who had stopped breathing at 2:36 in the morning. Her head swam. The fluorescent lights hummed their electric lullaby. She had not eaten. She had not slept. The exhaustion lived in her bones like a parasite that had learned to feed on hope. The baby's chest rose and fell. Rose and fell. The rhythm that meant he was alive. Emma slept in the chair across the room, her small hand clutching Sofia's grandmother's recipe book, the only thing Sofia owned that mattered anymore. The pages were yellowed and warped from use. Notes in her grandmother's precise handwriting ran along the margins, instructions for feeding a child when there was no money. How to make soup from chicken bones. The storm will pass and you are far stronger than you think. Sofia closed her eyes. Behind her eyelids, she saw the Mass Avenue Bridge at 1:13 a.m., the Charles River moving dark below like a throat about to swallow her whole. The door opened. Footsteps. Measured. Unhurried. Luca Valenti entered the hospital room like he owned it, because in Boston, he might as well have. Expensive dark suit despite the hour. Black cashmere coat draped over his shoulders like a crown no one had ever given him. His face was carved from stone, sharp cheekbones, a scar running from his left eye to his jawline, eyes the color of storm clouds just before the lightning comes. He was 38 years old and looked like a man who had learned to hurt people before he learned to speak. He sat in the chair beside her without asking permission. For a long moment, he did not speak. He simply watched his son breathe. "You gave your blood to save my son," Luca said finally. His voice was deep and solid like an oath. "You brought my daughter home. I do not understand you." Sofia turned her head to look at him. Up close, she could see the exhaustion carved into the lines around his eyes. "You don't have to understand," she whispered. "I just did what anyone should do." "But they don't." His jaw tightened. "People see my world and they run. They run so fast their feet barely touch the ground. You walked straight into it. To save a child you barely knew." The machines beeped their electronic rhythm. Outside the window, dawn was breaking over Boston in shades of gray and reluctant gold. "Your daughter was lost," Sofia said. I couldn't let her stay lost." Luca's eye shifted to her wrist where her sleeve had ridden up, exposing the map of scars beneath, thin white lines running in every direction like roads on a map of hell. He had seen those scars before, at Murphy's diner. He had not asked about them then. He did not ask now. Instead, he said, "I'm going to handle the people who took Emma. The people who hurt you. You don't have to be afraid anymore." Sofia grabbed his arm. His suit jacket was fine wool, soft in a way that felt like it belonged to a different world entirely. "What are you going to do?" Luca's expression went cold. Absolutely cold. "What needs to be done?" He stood and walked to the window. His silhouette against the dawnlight looked like a blade wrapped in shadow. 3 blocks away, at a luxury apartment on Boylston Street, Douglas Hale sat in his kitchen drinking espresso from a white porcelain cup. He wore a silk robe. He had not slept, but not from fear. Douglas Hale had never experienced fear in his life. He was a man who understood only appetite and the satisfaction of appetite. On his kitchen counter lay a stack of photographs. Girls. Young women. Their eyes empty of everything except survival. He had taken several of those photographs himself. He had built a business on the assumption that no one would ever stop him. He did not know that at 8:15 a.m., his door was going to explode inward. The sound was like a bomb in slow motion, wood splintering, hinges screaming, the world breaking open. 12 men in black tactical gear moved through his apartment like ghosts, like death walking on two legs. Not Luca's men. Rossetti family soldiers. Marco Rossetti had daughters of his own. Marco Rossetti understood codes. Douglas stood. His coffee cup shattered against the marble floor. A man caught him by the throat and slammed him against the refrigerator hard enough to crack the glass. Douglas's vision blurred. Pain exploded through his skull like a secondary sunrise. The lead soldier, older, scarred across his knuckles, eyes that had seen things, pulled out a phone. He showed Douglas a photograph. Sofia's back. The scars running in every direction like a map of suffering. You did this to a woman under Valenti protection, the soldier said. His voice was soft. That was worse than shouting. You stole Valenti's daughter. You know what that means. Douglas tried to scream. His throat produced only a strangled wheeze. Please, he gasped. I didn't know she was connected. I'll disappear. I'll leave Boston. I'll leave the country. Please? The soldier pulled out zip ties. Black plastic. Tight enough to cut off circulation. Too late, the soldier said. You're going somewhere no one can hear you scream. They dragged Douglas from his apartment. His silk robe tore. His feet left marks on the marble floor. By 8:19 a.m., his apartment was empty. No evidence. No trace. As if ghosts had come and gone. Douglas Hale was being transported to a warehouse near the harbor where the water moved like a secret and bodies were never found. Justice in Luca's world did not require law enforcement. It required only will and the men to execute it. Meanwhile, at a Beacon Hill mansion with copper gutters and ivy climbing the brick walls like a slow suffocation, Catherine Mercer sat in her sunroom having brunch. Fresh fruit. Turkish coffee. A phone call to her lawyer who assured her that everything was handled, everything was fine, no one was talking. She was wearing a silk morning robe in cream and gold. She had not looked in a mirror yet. If she had, she would have seen a woman of 56 trying very hard to look 42, and failing. The FBI agents came through her front door like an invasion. 4 of them. Black jackets. Badges on chains around their necks. Behind them, visible through the windows, Luca's Lieutenant Sal stood across the street with his hands in his pockets, watching everything. Luca had not killed Catherine Mercer. He had given her to the law instead. Which was worse? Catherine Mercer, the lead agent said. She was a woman in her 40s with the kind of face that had learned how to deliver terrible news. I'm calling my lawyer, Catherine said immediately. You need a warrant. You need. We have a warrant. The agent held it up. We have your financial records. We have emails. We have bank transfers to offshore accounts connected to Douglas Hale's trafficking network. We have communications discussing merchandise. We have evidence of payments made to individuals for the procurement and sale of minors. Catherine's face went white. The color drained like someone pulling a plug in her chest. This is a mistake, she said. I'm Catherine Mercer. My family has been in Boston for 4 generations. Do you know who my husband is? Do you know who? We know exactly who you are, the agent said. You're under arrest for human trafficking, conspiracy to commit human trafficking, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit money laundering. The handcuffs clicked. They were silver and cold and final. Catherine Mercer screamed about lawyers as they led her to a federal vehicle waiting in her driveway. Her neighbors watched from behind their curtains. Her friends watched from windows. By noon, the story was breaking on every news outlet: Beacon Hill socialite arrested in federal trafficking raid. By evening, her family's name had become a synonym for darkness. Back in the hospital room, Luca watched the news on a small television mounted in the corner. Catherine Mercer's face filled the screen, her makeup running, her mouth open in a scream that no one could hear through the speakers. Sofia sat beside the baby's incubator, watching Luca's face. She had expected rage. She saw only the cold satisfaction of someone who had orchestrated something complicated and seen it executed perfectly. "What did you do?" Sofia whispered. Luca did not look away from the screen. "I made sure they can never hurt anyone again. Douglas Hale won't see daylight. Catherine Mercer will spend the rest of her life in a cell. 40 years minimum. Justice, not death. Death would be too quick, too easy, too merciful." Sofia felt the weight of those words settle into her chest like a stone sinking through water. The baby breathed. Emma slept. And Sofia understood, in that moment, that loving a man like this meant understanding that safety came at a price she was still learning how to calculate. But what she did not know was that her decision to help Emma had already changed Luca in ways neither of them could yet measure. That within a year, everything would be transformed. That his empire would legitimize itself in her name. That a child would call her mother for the first time and break her heart open with a single word. That nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same. The machines beeped their electronic rhythm. The sun rose over Boston. And in a hospital room where a baby fought for life and a woman sat beside him, the machinery of redemption had already begun to turn. 1 year later, and Sofia Hartley no longer counted her heartbeats like currency. The hospital room had become a memory. The baby, Luca Jr., breathed on his own now, his lungs strong and pink and gloriously alive. Emma slept in the penthouse with her father, no longer afraid of the dark because Sofia had spent 7 months teaching her that darkness was just the absence of light, and light could be summoned. Sofia had learned this herself in ways she was still processing. When Luca offered her the position, it came not as charity but as a statement of fact. She would be Emma's nanny. She would live in the building. $85,000 per year. Health insurance that covered therapy, which she needed. Dental. A kitchen where she could cook without rationing. A bedroom where no one could find her at 3 in the morning with violence in their hands. She had said no. Emma had said yes for her. The child, 9 years old now, with Luca's dark eyes and her dead mother's stubbornness, had climbed into Sofia's lap and whispered with the absolute certainty of the young, "If you leave, who will make sure I'm safe? Who will tell me the stories about your nonna? Who will be my mommy when daddy is sad?" Sofia had broken into pieces right there. The pieces had taken 6 months to reassemble into something functional. The apartment Luca gave her existed on the same floor as his own suite. Not attached, she had her boundaries, but close enough that Emma could reach her in 90 seconds. A real bed. A window that faced the Charles River, not a brick wall. A kitchen larger than her previous entire apartment. Sofia had stood in that kitchen for 3 hours without moving, just breathing in the space, waiting for something to go wrong. Nothing went wrong. That was the part that terrified her most. In the first weeks, the nightmares came like clockwork. She would wake gasping, Douglas Hale's voice still echoing in the dark, his hand still on her shoulders, Catherine Mercer's laughter still ringing like broken glass. Sofia would lie there shaking until the reality reasserted itself: locked doors, security cameras, Luca's men positioned at every entrance, the impossible fact that she was safe. Then Emma would appear in the doorway, 7 years old and wearing dinosaur pajamas, and crawl into bed beside her. "It's okay," the child would say with devastating certainty. "We're safe now. The bad people are gone." Emma had taken to this role as if she'd been training for it her entire life, the reassurer, the witness, the small hand pressed against Sofia's shoulder until the shaking stopped. Within 2 months, the nightmare frequency halved. Sofia would wake and reach for Emma automatically, and the child would already be there, as if some frequency only they could hear had sounded. Luca watched from doorways. Sofia knew he did. She'd catch sight of him sometimes, silhouetted against the hallway light, observing her as she braided Emma's hair or taught baby Luca Jr. the Italian lullabies her grandmother had sung. His expression was always unreadable, but his hands would be clenched into fists at his sides. "You're doing something I thought was impossible," Rocco said one evening, finding Sofia in the kitchen at midnight, kneading dough with the muscle memory of her grandmother's hands. The lieutenant stood in the doorway like he was afraid to step fully into the space. In 15 years serving Luca Valenti, Rocco had seen many things. He had not seen his boss sit at a dinner table with a woman who wasn't his wife in 14 years. He had not seen Luca's shoulders lose their constant tension. He had definitely not seen Luca Jr. sleeping peacefully through the night because Sofia had figured out the exact pitch and cadence his father's deep voice lacked. "What?" Sofia asked, not looking up from the dough. Her hands moved in circles, pressing, folding, pressing again. "You're healing him," Rocco said simply. "The boss. I don't know if you realize it, but you're healing him from the inside out." Sofia stopped moving. The dough sat between her palms, warm and alive and unfinished. "I'm just taking care of the children." Rocco shook his head. "No. You're showing him what it looks like when someone chooses to stay. When someone sees darkness and doesn't run. When someone builds something instead of destroying it." He left her there with the dough and the weight of what he'd said. Late-night conversations became their language. After the children slept, Sofia would find Luca on the penthouse balcony, looking out at Boston's scattered lights, and he would look at her like he was trying to decode something written in a language he'd never learned. They talked about her grandmother's recipes, not just the food but the love encoded in every ingredient. Sofia explained how her nonna had written notes in the margins of the recipe book, little prayers and observations, how making the pasta primavera had meant speaking directly to someone who'd loved her and been gone for 8 years. Luca listened the way other men might listen to confessions. His jaw would work silently. His hands would grip the balcony railing until his knuckles blanched white. One night he told her about his own mother, how she'd been a witness to violence she couldn't stop, how she died still trying to protect him from the world his father had built. He spoke in measured sentences, each word separated by the sound of the Boston wind cutting between the buildings. Sofia didn't touch him. They both seemed to understand that touch was a border they couldn't cross yet. She testified against Catherine Mercer via video feed, her face shielded, speaking about the bruises Catherine had witnessed and ignored, the casual cruelty she'd enabled, the way wealth had made her complicit in Sofia's destruction. Catherine's defense crumbled like old brick. 40 years minimum. Federal trafficking conspiracy. The woman who'd employed Sofia as her personal punching bag would spend more time behind bars than Sofia had spent breathing free air. Sofia started night classes in business management. Luca had arranged the education benefits without asking, the tuition simply existed in an account when she applied. She wanted to build something. The idea had come to her slowly, then all at once, cooking classes for trafficking survivors. Not pity disguised as help. Not charity that left you feeling smaller. Classes where you learned to make something with your hands, where you learned that following a recipe was just another form of trusting the process, where you fed yourself and other survivors and remembered that you were worth feeding. The idea became a business plan. The business plan became a 501c3 nonprofit called House of Hope. The nonprofit needed an office. Luca donated a building without being asked. Sofia found out when a lawyer appeared at her apartment with keys and a deed and said only, "The boss thought you might need space." She'd cried about that. Angry crying first, then grateful crying, then the complicated crying that comes when someone helps you build instead of taking what you've built. 6 months after leaving the penthouse apartment, Sofia moved into a modest one-bedroom near Boston Common. She decorated it herself, slowly, adding color in small increments. A blue chair. A print of sunflowers. Fairy lights strung above the window. These small things that cost money and meant she was real, that her life was hers to arrange. She saw Luca at Emma's school events. He would sit 3 rows behind her, watching their daughter perform in the school play, and Sofia would feel the weight of his gaze like a question she didn't yet know how to answer. She saw Rocco at the non-profit, dropping off a donation, telling her that the boss's businesses had gone legitimate: construction, restaurants, real estate development, the empire converting itself into something legal, something lasting. She saw his name on a check one morning and realized $50,000. Anonymous donor. She knew it was him. 8 months after moving out, Sofia stood on a penthouse balcony. Not Luca's penthouse, a donor's penthouse, actually, who'd opened his home for a fundraising event to support House of Hope. Sofia had worn a simple black dress. Her hair was down. She'd had her nails done for the first time in her life by someone who wasn't tearing her apart. She stood at the railing looking out at Boston's lights, thinking about bridges and $78 and the person she'd been the night she wanted to stop existing. That person felt like a different woman now. Healed enough to breathe. Successful enough to know her own name mattered. Strong enough to stand alone. She didn't hear the footsteps behind her. Sofia. The sound of her name in that voice, deep and solid like an oath, made every cell in her body remember something. She turned. Luca Valenti stood in a dark suit, his hands in his pockets, his face arranged in careful neutrality that fooled no one who'd spent 8 months learning to read him. He looked at her the way a man looks at something he's been trying to convince himself to release. "That $50,000, Sofia said quietly. "That was you?" "Yes." "Why?" He stepped closer to the railing but didn't touch her. The space between them felt measured, intentional, like he was calculating something dangerous. "Because you built something incredible without me. Because I needed to know you could succeed without my world touching it. Because Emma asked me last week why I let you go, and I couldn't answer her." Sofia's voice trembled. "What did you tell her?" Luca turned to face her fully, and when he spoke, his voice cracked like ice breaking on a river. "I told her I was afraid. Afraid that a woman who survived hell wouldn't want a man who's built his life in darkness. Afraid that I'd destroy the best thing that happened to my family." He put his hands on her shoulders, and Sofia felt 8 years of silence finally break. "You gave me back my daughter when I thought I'd lost her forever. You saved my son with your own blood. But more than that, you gave me back my soul. You showed me that goodness still exists, that people can endure hell and still choose kindness. I've spent 8 months trying to convince myself I don't love you." He paused, his dark eyes searching hers. "I failed." Sofia's eyes filled with tears. "I'm nobody. I'm a survivor with scars, Anne." "You're everything," Luca said. His thumb brushed her cheek. "You're the woman who stood on a bridge wanting to end it all and chose to save a child instead. You're the woman who walked into a Mafia boss's world with $78 in your pocket and no fear because a little girl needed her father. You're the woman who turned pain into purpose." He pulled something from his jacket pocket. Her grandmother's recipe book. "You left this at my house. Page 47 is marked." Sofia opened it with shaking hands. Her grandmother's handwriting appeared, the familiar script faded by decades. "The storm will pass and you are far stronger than you think." Beneath it, in Luca's careful handwriting, "The storm has passed. You are the strongest person I know. Will you let me stand beside you in the sunshine? L." Sofia looked up at him, tears streaming. "My world almost destroyed me once," she whispered. "My world destroyed the people who hurt you. My world protected you." Luca's voice was steady now, certain. "My world is dark, yes, but you're the light I want to build everything around." Sofia stepped forward and rested her forehead against his chest. She could feel his heartbeat, fast and alive and human. His arms wrapped around her, and she breathed in the scent of his cologne and the October night and the possibility of a future she'd stopped believing in. "I'm terrified," she said into his chest. "So am I," Luca answered. "But we're both still here. Still fighting. Still choosing to trust." They stood on the balcony as the city lights scattered like fallen stars below them. Behind the glass doors, inside the fundraiser, Emma pressed her face against the window. She saw them. She smiled. 3 years later, Sofia taught a 19-year-old survivor how to make her grandmother's pasta primavera. The girl's hand shook too much to fold the dough. Sofia covered the girl's hands with her own, and both of them trembled together. "I know you're scared," Sofia said softly. "I know you think you'll never be whole again. But listen to me, the storm will pass and you are far stronger than you think." The girl looked up with desperate hope. "I know," Sofia whispered, "because I was you. And if I could make it through, so can you." If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel, like and share this video with the people you love. Every comment you leave is a precious source of motivation. We wish all of you good health, a joyful life, and days filled with peace.